Definitely looks different in the suit and with his hair brushed.
Okay, please be seated. Thank you.
I think I'm back here with the got it working now, everyone. So really sorry about that.
Here.
Hey Pink, hey LH, Sherry, Caroline, Claire, Tara, Angel, Shani, RI, Claire, love, peace. Caroline, thanks for jumping over. Yeah, looks like a college graduate in the suit. A little more stern, I think, of a look.
Sorry. That's awesome. All right. This hybrid approach is challenging. Okay, so let's get on the record, please. We are now on the record. This is State versus Bryan Kohberger, CR 29222805. We're here for a hearing.
Can you all hear the judge okay?
Resolve this family's motion to appeal, amend, and/or clarify amended dissemination order that was filed back on February 3rd, was delayed because the media sought some relief from the Idaho Supreme Court. There was a delay to find out what the Supreme Court was going to determine, which they did. And this morning we have the state represented by Mr. Thompson and Mr. Rudley. Mr. Kohberger is in the courtroom, represented by Ms. Taylor and Mr. Logston. And I believe Mr. Gray is there. He is.
Let me sit back here, Your Honor.
And I believe some of the family is participating, observing on Zoom. So before we get into the arguments, I want to address the Gonzalez family and all the families, really. Didn't really have an opportunity to do this at the arraignment. My heart does go out to the families. And the loss to your children is devastating and horrific. I mean, there's no dispute about that. I also want to acknowledge and apologize because at the arraignment, I did stumble over a couple of the names, Kaylee's name and Zayman's name, and I want to explain that. I was up all night, really ill, probably food poisoning, and I was not at full potential. Probably also some emotion and nerves as I read those names. And I'm sorry, so that's my apology for that. I know some people were concerned about that and I wanted to address it. I also wanted to explain a procedure at the arraignment that apparently drawn from the media that some people were confused when Mr. Kohberger declined to enter a plea. And I just wanted to clear that up because I didn't really see any explanation about that in the media. That is Mr. Kohberger's right. And under Rule 11A1 of the Idaho Criminal Rules, and this is a quote, "If a defendant refuses to plead, the court must direct the entry of a plea of not guilty." That is not unusual. But reading the media, it seemed like somewhat mysterious. So I wanted to explain that, particularly to the media. It's a small issue, but it's somewhat, well, I have an obligation, just as he has an obligation to take a process that we are responsible to follow in the courtroom. And for journalists, it's always important for this. So if you're about that, you can always find the criminal on the Idaho Supreme Court website. And it's very, very easy to read that and maybe get a better understanding. All right, so that's my speech for today. Mr. Gray, come on up.
I thought that was interesting there, how Bryan kind of nodded as if he knows the law there. And he might, right? He might have some knowledge of that, and but seemed pretty professional there.
And
if you allow me just a minute or two to get sorted out.
take your time. Take your time. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Is it just me, or does he look shorter here? Is he trying to sit down and be shorter? Look at how he's lower than Ann Taylor. He was never lower than Ann Taylor when he was in that orange. In the previous hearings, he was above her. He was taller. There, it almost seems like, I don't know if it's a different chair, or is he sitting down lower than her?
Can I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
First, Your Honor, we'd like to thank you for apologizing to the victim's family. I think it was an emotional day for them, and they appreciate your apology. I know that they took that part up. Thank you. I first want to start with the procedural history of this non-dissemination order, if I could. On January 3rd, 2023, the Judge Marshall submitted a non-dissemination order. And in that order, it applied to parties in the action, which would have been the prosecution, the defense, and any agents, investigators involved in it. After that non-dissemination order was issued, I reached out to the prosecutor's office to see if I could get Judge Marshall's email. For some reason, I don't know if they took it down, but I couldn't find it online. And they informed me that they were not privy to give me that information. Then, on January 13th, there was a Zoom call that was requested by Judge Marshall. That Zoom call was requested at 1 o'clock on the 13th. I received an email at 12:58 from Judge Marshall's clerk requesting a Zoom call to speak to all interested parties. The Zoom call occurred at 4 o'clock p.m. During that meeting, the judge reminded us, all the parties involved, it was the prosecution, it was the defense, it was myself, it was the attorneys for the victims' families, the attorneys for the witnesses, I believe were there as well, a number of attorneys, and reminded us that her non-dissemination order mirrored that of Idaho Rules of.
That was kind of an interesting little sequence right there. I'm not trying to hurt Bryan's feelings here by analyzing his face or anything, but I'm going to watch that again. I'm going to back that up a little bit. That was interesting. It's kind of when he mentions the victims' families, he just kind of has that blank stare. He definitely looks more stern than he than he did, in my opinion, in his previous hearings. Whoops, sorry about that. But yeah, he looks a little more stern. Let's watch that sequence.
Judge Marshall's clerk requesting a Zoom call to speak to all interested parties. The Zoom call occurred at 4 o'clock p.m. During that meeting, the judge reminded us, all the parties involved, it was the prosecution, it was the defense, it was myself, it was the attorneys for the victims' families, the attorneys for the witnesses, I believe were there as well, a number of attorneys, and reminded us that her non-dissemination order mirrored that of Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct 3.6. As part of that hearing, and I think it's details here, she talks about the rule applies to all lawyers participating in the Zoom meeting, the state and the defense and all attorneys for the witnesses. When she had that Zoom meeting, and I've requested the transcript from that Zoom meeting and haven't been able to receive it yet from Judge Marshall's court, so we could have a full transcript of what went on that day. But as part of that meeting, I had questioned Judge Marshall regarding the victim's family and whether or not they were allowed to speak to the media based on the fact that she had said all interested parties as well in the initial non-dissemination order. I didn't receive any clarification. I was just instructed to go back to Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct 3.6, as well as I was told, and this is in quotes from her Zoom release, take their duties in utmost regard in conducting themselves and advising their clients. I took that as...
Yeah, I saw the comments here, just about his posture. It kind of Pink mentioned being emotionless, being coached. A housewife, I think that's a great point. I feel like he's been coached on multiple levels. I do think that they are kind of trying to improve his appearance here. Right? Obviously, he's wearing the suit. His hair is done, so they're trying to make him look, better than in the orange jumpsuit and things like that. Definitely seems relaxed, though. This is kind of what my point was, in that innocence video, and him, not claiming his innocence more. And I just, it's not just a normal crime that you're just being accused of here. This is one of the worst crimes in a long time. And you're this hated person in not only the country, but in the world. People know about you. And you just sit there, like it's no big deal. It's just strange. I don't know. We're not in his shoes, but it just seems like there would be more emotion there. I think a lot of people would cry, or I would expect to actually see more emotion. Not just this kind of coldness all the time. And it's just, maybe he's trying to be professional and calm and respect the court, but your life is on the line here. And if you're innocent, this is, if he's innocent, this is bullshit, right? Him even being there. He doesn't even care. If you're innocent, it's like, what are you doing there? You would be emotional about that. You wouldn't just be stoic.
I should tell my clients to be quiet. She reiterated that again in the Zoom call by saying that I had ethical duties ascribed above in the Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct for commentary of Rule 3.6. And she reminded me later that lawyers have a responsibility in giving advice to their clients. I disagreed with Judge Marshall on almost every point during that meeting. As well as, if I had known that we were going to be discussing the Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct in that issue, I would have prepared. But only having a 3-hour notice to allow me, and not knowing what the subject of the meeting was going to be, didn't allow me to address those issues at that time. Now, after the non-dissemination order in January 3rd, and then the January 13th, 2023 meeting, the judge amended the non-dissemination order on January 18th. And she basically repeated the same order, except for she added the attorneys for any interested party in this case, including attorneys representing witnesses, victims, or victims' families, as well as parties to the above entitled action. So you can see the difference is that the first one dealt with parties to the case. The second one went way over the top, addressing all attorneys that might be associated with the case, or any attorneys that might have an interested party in this case. So that's where we are today. I filed a motion based on that additional language. Now, I'd like to get into some of the issues here. It's very clear that I am not a party to the case, and the victims' families are not a party to the case. That's very clear through all of the case law, as well as...
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
There's no dispute about that.
Okay. Then
your clients are not parties. The only parties of this case are the state and Mr. Kohberger. That's clear in the case law with regard to any victims or victims' families. There are constitutional protections and statutory protections for victims and their families.
I would agree.
That's well established.
So let's get into the actual non-dissemination order itself, how it addresses to me personally as the attorney for the victim's family. This non-dissemination order, of all of the cases and all of the motions that were filed, and referencing every case that was listed in this case, none of them apply to a victim's attorney, an attorney representing the victims. The Idaho v. Tapp case was an attorney speaking about a judge who he was in front of. The Good case was a defense attorney that spoke to the media. The Mezebov case was a defense attorney and a prosecutor. The Morrissey case was a defense attorney and a press conference. Varner versus Delahunty was an attorney and a judge, all parties to the case. Cutler was a defense attorney, U.S. v. Cutler. Zau versus Slop was a defense attorney. Irwin versus Dowd were the prosecutor's actions and speaking to the media. Shepard v. Maxwell is a trial publicity regarding the prosecutor's actions prior to trial. None of those things apply to the victim's family or the victim's attorney in any way. Now, I do agree that the court has the power to control those that are parties to the case and that are involved in the case in some way. But we have to define that, what means involvement in the case. Part of that is that the judge referred to the Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct 3.6, trial publicity. She references that multiple times as the basis for her non-dissemination order in this case and how it might apply to me. If you'll read the first paragraph, a lawyer who participates or has participated in the investigation or litigation of a matter shall not make extrajudicial statements. That is not me.
I guess I wonder what is it that they're what is Shannon Gray after here? What is his kind of point? You know, what is it they want to say? You know what? I guess I don't understand why he's so involved in this gag order argument and how it's impacting him and the families. Bryan appears to be probably happy to be out of his jail cell and observing here. All he has to do is kind of sit back and listen. He definitely looks a little more smug, in my opinion. I don't want to say smug, but more, I think I said earlier, stern, a little more confident, actually. Maybe it's the suit, but like I said, it's just not what I would expect to see of an innocent person sitting there locked up in jail for a year, being accused of this horrible crime, being accused of doing who knows what. You just kind of sit there, you know, looking perfectly comfortable is a little bit strange.
It never has been me. It can't be me. because I'm not involved in the litigation. She also says
Can I ask you a question about
Yep.
that? Because, I mean, I think the case law is quite clear that attorneys who are representing witnesses can be restricted to some degree, partly because they have access to particular information that should not be shared with the public. And if I'm recalling correctly, the state has suggested or has determined that your clients are witnesses potentially. So that's kind of the
and I can
issue
address
right
it, Your
there.
Honor.
Go ahead.
As part of that is that, let's just make it clear, the victim's family has never been involved in this investigation, ever, from the get-go. After Mr. Kohberger was indicted, we received no information about anything regarding the prosecution, nothing. They wouldn't even tell us that a grand jury was being impaneled for Mr. Kohberger. They told us that there was a grand jury that was being impaneled, and common sense, we figured it out, because he's the only guy in the county. But they wouldn't even relay that information. They haven't given us any information regarding the investigation of the case. But the most critical part of it is that the prosecution has never, ever interviewed the Gonzalez family. So how in the world would we ever be able to be witnesses in this case? And for what purpose would we be? If you're asking about for sentencing purposes, that's post-conviction. That's after he's been convicted on the case. Prior to trial, we're not any witnesses. And that falls into completely different statutes. That falls into the restitution statute.
Sorry, everybody. I'm interested in Bryan here more than this argument about the gag order and when certain statements are made. I want to look at, kind of see what's going on there, but I wanted to kind of look at that again. He's kind of nodding in agreement there when he's mentioning the Gonsalves family having not been interviewed.
That information. They haven't given us any information regarding the investigation of the case. But the most critical part of it is that the prosecution has never, ever interviewed the Gonzalez family. So how in the world would we ever be able to be witnesses in this case? And for what purpose would we be? If you're asking about for sentencing purposes, that's post-conviction. That's after he's been convicted on the case. Prior to trial, we're not any witnesses. And that falls into completely different statutes. That falls into the restitution statute. It falls into the victim statute. I just handled that matter in front of the Lori Vallow case, where the judge, I had a motion, the defense did not want the victim's family to appear. And so the judge had to make a determination whether they were immediate family, because it was the grandparents. Completely different statutes because that was post-conviction. And those witnesses were allowed in the courtroom and were involved in the sentencing aspect of it. Okay? So we are in a very, very different factual situation here. I'm not asking as a witness to the case, which witness to the case, they've never ever told us in any way how we would be witnesses in this case, other than the conjecture that we may have potentially. That's not good enough to stop the free speech of the victim's family, as well as myself. The other thing is that if the victims can say whatever they want during the free speech, and that's exempt, why would I not be allowed to say the same thing that they say?
My understanding is that your clients are not restricted in any way, never have been.
Well, and I'll give you an example.
I mean, is that true?
That's right. Well, I agree now, because that's not the tone of the Zoom meeting.
Well, we're not talking about the
Okay.
tone. I'm talking about the language of the order.
Yes, the language of the order now, because any interested parties, I asked for clarification, now understand that they can say whatever they want. And that's correct. But here's the problem. If they said, we think the judge is crazy, would I advise them against that? Absolutely.
Thank you.
But if I went and said, the family has said that they think the judge is crazy, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm repeating exactly what they said. Now, what comes into play is, for our purposes today, is what if I offer up my own opinion? Right? Well, then I'm already governed by the Idaho rules of professional conduct. And if
I'm glad you're acknowledging that.
no, well, every attorney is, Your Honor. I mean, it's not.
Thank you.
Every attorney is. So the idea that I'm not, but every rule doesn't apply all the time. If I'm talking poorly about a judge, another rule might pop in. 8.3, I think, is what it is, or 8.1. If I'm saying other things that might affect things another way, then maybe the trial publicity. But the trial publicity, I don't even think applies to me in this anyway, because if you look at it, it says it applies to a lawyer who is participating or has participated in the investigation or litigation of a matter shall not make extrajudicial statements. And it goes on, highlighted by Judge Marshall, then in paragraph 3. The rule sets forth a basic general prohibition about lawyers making statements that the lawyer knows or should know will have a substantial likelihood of materially prejudicing the adjudicated proceeding. And at the bottom of the paragraph, it says this. Rule only applies to lawyers who are or who have been involved in the investigation or litigation of cases and their associates. If I'm not a party to the case, I can't be involved in the investigation or the litigation of this case in any way. So I would argue that the trial publicity rule of professional conduct does not apply to me as well.
Help me understand what you think you can't say that you've already been saying.
I have no idea. I have no idea what.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. What is it they want to say? What is he upset about here? I can understand the family hiring an attorney, for this high-profile case to consult and have representation. But what is it they want to say, or are they upset that they're not getting more information maybe from law enforcement about what's going on? I'm not quite sure what they're going for here. Some of the comments here really quick wanted to respond. A little bit confrontational, Angel, but he's persuasive. He's a lawyer, so I think he's doing a pretty good job. Yeah, thanks, Harlot, about the technical difficulties, everybody. But I'm just curious, what is it they want to say?
You've been on the media and you've had interviews, so I'm kind of wondering how do you feel that you've been restrained in any way with this order?
I think you're not seeing what the point is. What the point is that the court has issued a non-dissemination order that restricts First Amendment rights, that is overly broad in almost every aspect of it. Anybody that's interested and they have an attorney, when an attorney who's walking down the street could offer up his opinion in any way, it also takes away from the idea, doesn't the court want victims' families to have representation, to guide them through the legal process? Wouldn't the court encourage that they could explain things, say, maybe advise them on what to say, what not to say? I mean, if you're taking my voice away, you're taking the voice away of everything. The other part of it is this, is that I'm absolutely blown away that the prosecution doesn't agree with me in this case. The reason being is that they are representing the victims, which in turn are the victims' families. And I have not seen a poorer line of communication in my 22 years of practicing than the prosecution's office and the Gonzalez family. And I think it stems from, initially we were critical of the investigation. They wanted to find the person who did this. That's normal emotions. And then from that point on, it has been, we are the enemy. And that's how we feel in this. And so...
Yeah, really quick, Justice said the prosecution is holding all information back. Yeah, I agree. The way that Shannon Gray, I don't want to say the Gonzalez family, Shannon Gray here is involved, but very pushy, inserting himself into the case, Why? Again, why? What's going on here? What is the reason that he's so involved? Why isn't he just stepping back and letting the prosecution do their job to get the conviction here? Why isn't he supporting them? You know, we have the victim's family here butting heads with the prosecution. It's really strange.
Me guiding them and then trying to limit my voice and helping them out in some way, and then throwing out a random idea that they may be potential witnesses when they've never ever interviewed them in any way. It's just an attempt to shut the attorney out and shut the family out, is what it is. Because if I had come to you today and said, we've given 7 interviews, Your Honor, we may be witnesses in this case, we've done all of these things, it may be a different story. We haven't done anything. They haven't interviewed the entire family. So,
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's in all the investigation, obviously, and a lot of us don't know and probably won't know until the trial.
and the other thing,
Well, let me just say this. I think one of the potential issues is this is potentially a death penalty case. Hasn't been noticed, but that is a potential, and the families of the victims certainly would be witnesses in that process of sentencing. That is not post-conviction technically, is it?
Well, if your goal is fair and impartial jury, right, that's the reason for the non-dissemination order. Well, after the conviction, that goes away.
Well, it's also confidence in the process. So I have that job. I have a job of protecting and preserving the First Amendment and also the Sixth Amendment. And there is some balancing there. That is why lawyers who have access to information that is not accessible by the public have particular restrictions. That's what this whole case is about. I mean, this hearing is about.
And as an officer of the court, I can tell you we have 0 access.
Okay, so you're saying that the prosecutor's office has not shared information with your client.
Regarding the facts of this case, no, they haven't.
All right.
How things occurred.
Everybody's going to have a chance to weigh in on this, and I just, you're helping me understand what the issues are, so thank you.
Well, so that's really the issue here. I mean, and this is an important ruling, because what you're doing is this has never happened before. Ever has it happened before that a Judge Marshall, has tried to silence the attorneys for victims. Never has it happened that I'm aware of.
Would you feel more comfortable if there was a more concrete description of what people could say and what they can't say?
I don't think you have the authority to, Your Honor.
Well, I think I do have the authority.
Well, my argument is that part of the argument is that.
In fact, I know I have the authority to do that.
Well, and the authority would be through the attempt to have a fair and impartial jury, that you can control people that are involved in the case.
Judges love to say that to lawyers when there's a little disagreement. That judges love to say. In fact, I know that. They usually do.
Correct.
That's part of it.
And we're not involved in the case.
Okay. That's hard to accept. But
we're not witnesses in the case. We're not involved in the investigation. We're not involved in the litigation. I can't file any motions. I can't subpoena anybody. I can't cross-examine witnesses. I can't do anything. So this idea that there's this loose idea that there may be, weighing that versus our freedom to speak, First Amendment, is...
We're talking about your
That's right.
speech.
That's right.
Not your client's speech.
But that is my speech. That is part of it, though.
Well, in your memorandum, you are suggesting that you also have an independent position that you are representing yourself.
I do.
It's distinctive from your responsibility to your clients.
That's why the motion is for amending or clarification, because there's the clients that have the free to speak. there's me repeating what they have to say. If they said we thought the judge was crazy, and I said the judge was crazy, it doesn't violate the non-dissemination order because I'm allowed to say that. And then there's my independent voice, where I said, the judge is crazy? Yeah, I think the judge is crazy. That goes into another layer, right? Where Idaho rules of professional conduct would fall into play, and what I would be doing or what I couldn't do. Not the non-dissemination order, because we're not parties to the case. I'd be governed by...
It's interesting how we have, you have the prosecution here on the right, and you have the defense on the left, and then you just have Shannon Gray in the middle making his case, and both sides are just kind of sitting there. It doesn't seem like they're very happy about the whole situation. Again, just a weird dynamic, right? Weird dynamic with this attorney of the victim's family inserting himself here into this case.
The Idaho rules of professional conduct, if I made those statements, extradite those statements. And I may or may not fall under the probability. I would argue that I don't, because I'm not a party to it. I'm not litigated it, I don't have any information on it, none of those things. So really, that's where the authority for me, for my voice, would come from the Idaho rules of professional conduct, if I did that. And if I made a statement that I thought didn't apply for trial publicity purposes, that would be an argument for another day. But it wouldn't be for a contempt of court for me, because I'm not a party to the case and I'm not involved in the case in any way. I'm just repeating what my clients say, or I'm just saying my own individual opinion, which doesn't, by the way, makes it absolutely unduly prejudicial. Because what if a guy is on an Idaho bar member, is walking down the street, looks up, sees a television program where the Gonzalez family says, well, we thought the judge was crazy, right? And then all of a sudden, the media is outside, and they interview him, they say, hey, you're an attorney here. What about the judge being crazy? Well, I've been in front of him 3 or 4 times, and I would agree with him. You're going to sanction him and contempt of court? You can't. Same as me, because I'm not a party to it. He's not a party to it. He might be governed by the Idaho rules of professional conduct by commenting on you, Your Honor, but it wouldn't be because of the judge's non-dissemination order. So how can it not apply to him, but it can apply to me? It can't.
Well, the case law suggests that because you represent potential witnesses, that you have access to information that may not or should not be shared with the public. That's what the case law says.
And I would argue this: what potential witnesses are we, number one, and what access to information do we have? I think the defense has argued that we have some sort of access because the clients can tell me whatever they want to tell me, right? Well, that's free speech. They can say whatever they want to me, and I could go off and say whatever I want that they said. Because it's free speech. It's the First Amendment. So you can't, this non-dissemination order is so...
It's like, is he arguing to make a point, or is he arguing because this ruling is hurting him in some way, or the family, or preventing them from doing something? It almost seems like he's focusing in on these technicalities of the ruling, trying to kind of get a win, just to make a point. But what's the end result? What is it he's after?
Broad, none of the case law applies to people that are outside of the defense or the prosecution. That's the point of it. That's the whole point of a non-dissemination order, because they have access to it. They have access to the information. Victims, attorneys, families do not. And the idea that we may or may not be a potential witness is enough for Your Honor? I just can't see that, especially when there's no history of them ever being a witness. And to tell you the truth, the day after they filed that notice, or the day before they filed the notice that we may be potential witnesses, we had just gotten out of a meeting with the prosecutor's office. discussing whatever we could discuss, like our concerns, because that's all we do is go in and talk about our concerns, and they tell us we can't say anything, we can't say anything, we can't say anything. We'll get to it. When we walked up, nowhere in that meeting were we described as being witnesses in this case. But all of a sudden, the next day, they thought we might be, even though they've never interviewed us. So they're throwing stuff in the air that is not justified, and the idea that he thinks maybe might is not enough to regulate my free speech in this as the attorney for the victim's family, because that's what we are. We're not attorney for witnesses, we're attorney for the victim's family. And if the court has any other questions, I'd be more than happy.
I understand your position.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. So let me go to the state. I don't know if that's Mr. Thompson or Mr. Rutland.
It'll be me. Can I have one moment, Your Honor?
Certainly. Thank you.
Your Honor, if I may,
Yes, you may.
Mr. Rudley is actually,
Yeah, Harlett said he does just seem very argumentative. It sounds like he's kind of airing his frustrations. I don't think it's helping his case. The judge is also kind of a dick, though. I don't know who started it. It almost seems like he's got something against the previous judge. And I don't know, does anybody know why there was a change in judges? You know, initially it was a different judge there, but he definitely seems to be calling her out for all of these different, rulings that she made. He even made the statement at one point that he had never seen that ever done before.
going to be arguing on the motions themselves, but as attorneys, we have a duty of candor to the court. Mr. Gray has made representations to the court that at best are misleading and in many ways simply untrue. And I need to correct them for the record. Because the media is here. I do not want the public to come away with the impression that improprieties have occurred. First, Mr. Gray, on behalf of his clients, has propounded a number of questions to our office and to the investigators. We have answered the ones that we can. We have not shared ones that we are concerned that Mr. Gray or his clients would make public and compromise the integrity of the investigation. For him to say that we provided no information is simply not true. Secondly, he claims that law enforcement has not interviewed his clients and that somehow that is the investigator's fault. In fact, from the very beginning, the investigators have attempted to interview his clients, and Mr. Gray has not permitted it. So just for the record, I want to make sure that's clear. Thank you, Your Honor.
If I could speak to that, Your Honor.
You'll be able to
Thank
come
you.
back in after you hear the other
Thank you.
arguments. Mr. Rutland, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. In State v. Spencer, died by...
Wow, that's an interesting claim. The fact that they haven't interviewed them at all. This is Bill Thompson making this claim. He's been attached to the case since the beginning, and he's saying that they haven't been able to get an interview. And these are the parents of the victims in this case. You know, remember early on, there was a full-on investigation happening there, you know, before they knew who Bryan Kohberger was, before they had a suspect, and they haven't been interviewing the family. That's very strange.
The Supreme Court noted that it is also the duty of the prosecutor to ensure the right to a fair and impartial trial. Under the dictates of Shepard v. Maxwell, the court has a duty to take affirmative steps to address the impacts that intense pretrial publicity can have on a case. As noted in Shepard, Nebraska Press Association versus Stewart, and their progeny, an order like the one in this case is an appropriate measure for addressing that duty of the court. As Mr. Boston's experts have noted, attorneys often have information about a case that may not be appropriate for dissemination in the press. Additionally, attorneys carry a greater weight when appearing on television. For instance, what might be easier for the parties to address is a juror that says, I've seen coverage on the case, but I don't always trust what I've seen on TV, and I can set that aside. What's more difficult is a juror that says, I've seen attorneys for the prosecution, attorneys for the defense, or attorneys for the victims on television talking about a critical aspect of the case. In the matter of Gentile versus State Bar of Nevada, that case involved an attorney who held one press conference in 1991 after the indictment of his client. In this case, Mr. Grace repeatedly issued statements and been on television. At minimum, it's insincere to argue that he's feeling bound by the order when it's clearly not abided by. In Gentile, the court noted that the speech of attorneys is subject to less substantial, or it can be regulated by less substantial means. In this case, as we've shown by the affidavit we filed, the Gonsalves families are potential witnesses in a trial, or more specifically, at sentencing. The order in this case is not vague, overbroad, unduly restrictive, or not narrowly drawn. It precludes all extrajudicial statements of the attorneys in this case, attorneys for the witnesses, victims, law enforcement, and investigators. The order addresses, if the court were to apply strict scrutiny, the order addresses a substantial likelihood that pretrial publicity poses to the integrity of the judicial system, and is tailored to ensure that the rights to a fair trial are upheld. As we briefed in the case of Levine, the alternatives such as sequestration of the jury or changing a venue aren't going to mitigate the impacts of statements, extrajudicial statements in this case, and are unlikely to do so. Thus, the state contends that the order is an appropriate measure of the court to uphold its duty under Shepherd, Nebraska Press Association, and the like to preserve the right to a fair and impartial trial. At a minimum, Mr. Gray's statements that he's not bound by trial publicity rules or 3.6 in this case illustrate why the order of the court is necessary in this matter. And so we would ask that the court uphold the amended non-dissemination order, or at most tailor it to those statements specifically precluded in Rule of Professional Conduct 3.8. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Redley. Yeah, do you think that would be helpful to just, and I asked Mr. Gray this same question, would it be helpful to say, okay, you can say these things, but you can't say these things, and be more specific about that?
Your Honor, our initial position is that the total prohibition of extrajudicial statements is the safest and most responsive way in this case to address and preserve the right to a fair and impartial trial.
All right. Can you go back? You mentioned this about the standard particularly applying to the lawyers who are somehow connected with the case.
Lisa Marie in the chat here said, is anyone else nervous about what the prosecution has as evidence? I'm a little bit more nervous about how the trial could unfold with people being influenced over time. I actually think the evidence is something that the prosecution has going for them. I really think that there is some really strong evidence that we haven't heard about yet. I think there's going to be some surprises as far as the evidence goes that is released. There's more than we know of. We talked about that document early on in the video before I had those technical issues, and the defense was even saying the amount of evidence that they had to go through, they were needing more time to process it. So I think the evidence is one thing that is going to, in my opinion, it's what the prosecution really has going for them. And, you know, just with all of the media frenzy and all of the kind of rumors and theories going on, I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the evidence that they have, and I do think they have solid evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. In Nebraska Press Association v. Stewart, it's noted that I believe Justice Brennan states that there's no doubt that the court has authority, though it's in a footnote, it's no doubt that the court has authority to regulate the speech of attorneys, witnesses, and other participants in the court process. At this point, the evidence that's been provided is that the family would be potential witnesses in the case, as Mr. Thompson mentioned. We haven't necessarily been able to make a full assessment of that, but undoubtedly they'd be witnesses in any sentencing.
And what about the standard? Strict.
I thought that was interesting how he said that. It sounded like there probably wasn't a whole lot there as far as the family being a witness in the trial. They're emphasizing the sentencing phase. And, you know, Brian's sitting here right now in the courtroom listening to these lawyers talking about post-conviction and sentencing phases. And, you know, the prosecutor here is saying, well, yeah, they may be a witness in sentencing. And, you know, what's going through Brian's head with that? What is he thinking hearing them discussing him being found guilty sitting there in the chair? Right, if according to the defense, right, we're over analyzing him and picking out every little thing and picking on him, you know, if he's an innocent person and he's sitting there hearing them discussing his conviction and his sentencing, how, you know, what's going through his mind?
Scrutiny or lower standard?
Your Honor, we would argue that the court should apply the standard in Gentile versus State Bar of Nevada, where the Supreme Court stated that, I don't want to mess this up, so I'm going to click here.
That's fine.
That the speech of lawyers may be regulated under a less demanding standard. So we would argue that so long as the court finds that it has a duty under Shepard to preserve the right to a fair and impartial trial, that the order addresses the substantial likelihood that that negative pretrial publicity would have on that right, then the court would have authority to impose the amended non-dissemination order.
And everybody, if you see me looking down here, you can probably see the light. That's just my phone. I'm keeping an eye on the chat there. So this is you all right here.
Thank you, Mr. Rathman.
Thank you.
Mr. Ross.
Judge, I think a lot has already been said, and obviously you wrote a lot in the briefing, so I guess I'll just touch on a couple of things. In terms of the argument that the victims' families are not involved in the litigation of this case, and therefore don't fall into 3.6, it would be our position that if you have statutory and constitutional rights involved in this case, you're involved in the litigation. Regardless of whether or not the prosecution is willing to work closely with you or whatever issue you have there, the reality is if you have literal rights that permit you certain things, that are involved in this case, you're involved in litigation, and therefore you would fall within 3.6 just like everyone else. Second, the standard from Gentile is the substantial likelihood of material prejudice. I don't want to get too much into that, Judge. I think that's kind of this afternoon's argument. I think the main thing before the court, as far as Mr. Gray and the family, is just, do they fall within this, and then the court to decide what is appropriate. But I would note that given the vast amount of media coverage in this case, and the fact that it seems like no matter what anybody says or does, in one way, shape, or form, it will be twisted into an attack on my client. We also agree that at this point the safest thing to do is for everyone to just not be talking to the media and allow statements to be made here where we all get a chance to speak and the media gets all that information. If they still choose to do what it is they've been doing, then that's on them. But we don't have somebody just trying to whip the media into a frenzy and send this case to the firing squad or recovery or something like that. So that's our main concern. The only other thing that I wanted to address, and the court addressed this a little bit, the reason we stand silent with grand jury indictments is because there's an old arcane rule that says that if you have a grand jury indictment and you enter a plea, you are accepting the validity of the indictment. I haven't seen a prosecutor try to use that in a long time, but we can avoid any possible claims that somehow we can't challenge anything with the indictment by simply standing silent and having the court enter the plea. So just so that everybody's clear, that's why we do that.
So if you couldn't hear that clear, he was clarifying at the end there that the reason they stood silent with Bryan's plea was because they want to leave the door open down the road in case they want to make an argument, and by entering a plea they feel that it's accepting the indictment and validating it to some extent, and there could be ways that the prosecution could leverage that to prevent them from submitting evidence or other legal avenues there. So they're clarifying the reason that they stood silent. And it sounds like that's a reaction to some of the media response, of him standing silent before, which I agree with. There are a lot of other people out there who will take every little thing like that and kind of run with it. The fact of him standing silent as if, there's more to it than there is, but it's pretty much legal strategy, right? And it makes sense to me that and that's pretty much what I figured it was when they didn't enter a not guilty or a guilty plea there. It almost felt like that when they were saying the way Ann Taylor said that they're standing silent. It's almost kind of scoffing at the charges. You know what I mean? Like it's oh, this is so ridiculous, I'm not even going to answer to these charges.
Does the court have any questions for me?
I don't think so, but thank you for that additional education.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Gray, it's your motion, so you can respond to what other counsel expressed. Thank you.
I guess the first thing I would want to address is the prosecution's idea that I haven't allowed our clients to speak with the investigators. You'll realize that the date of the incident, I wasn't retained on this case until close to December 5th, which will be more than 3 weeks after the incident occurred, and they still have made no contact as far as investigating and interviewing the victims' families. So somehow that I precluded that in some way is just not true, Your Honor. And as far as scheduling those things, I'll just leave it at that. The second part is, everyone is quoting the Gentile case. The Gentile case is exactly like all of the other cases. It says over and over, it has to be a lawyer participating in the judicial proceedings. It has to be a lawyer who represents a defendant involved with the criminal justice system, a lawyer actively participating in trial,
A lawyer who's participating before the courts can only be limited if he's participating in front of the courts. None of it applies to me.
It seems like you're in the court right now.
Because you're the one that brought me in here because of the non-dissemination
You
order.
brought yourself.
Yeah, well,
You're the one who filed the motion.
I did file a motion because the non-dissemination order is
I
unconstitutional.
understand. I'm just trying to clarify what you just said.
Well, this will probably be the only time I'm allowed because I won't have the authority to file any other motions on anything else in this case.
Why would you say that?
Well, because I'm not a party to the case.
You can still, I mean, the media is not a party of the case either.
Once again,
But
they're not.
well, the Supreme Court has said they have standing to come into the court and address issues. So,
Yeah, but that's completely separate. They're not.
well, I know it's separate. But
Okay, so.
I also respect your position in representing the family's victim's family, and I respect that. And there are some constitutional issues, rights that they have. So I'm not just dismissing that.
And the mere fact that you have a right, I'm absolutely positive that the Idaho legislature and the Constitution, when they gave victims rights, didn't think that that was implementing those victims into the trial in some way. Absolutely positive that wasn't the intention of it.
Totally agree with that.
So this idea that if you have rights, then you're involved is just beyond. That being said, Your Honor, nothing precluded the prosecution from contacting my clients well before I was representing them. I had almost 3 weeks to contact them. I think, don't mark me on this, I think I was retained on December 5th. I think that was the day. I don't have my file in front of me, but it will hold me to it. But I think that was the day. So they had plenty of time to contact my clients and interview them if they were going to be potential witnesses in this case. And since then, every time we have had a meeting, we have initiated that conversation. It hasn't been the prosecution initiating that conversation.
So are you saying since you have been representing your clients that the prosecutor or investigators have not asked for interviews?
I would say this. In the meetings that I have had with the prosecution's office, I have asked, as part of that, whether interviewing my clients might be an issue. Would they like to do that in some way? I've offered that up in some way. And they've never taken us up on it. And maybe a random email.
So you can see Bill Thompson here shake his head right when Shannon Gray says that they've never taken them up on that. Let's watch that one more time.
In the meetings that I have had with the prosecution's office, I have asked, as part of that, whether interviewing my clients might be an issue. Would they like to do that in some way? I've offered that up in some way. And they've never taken us up on it. And maybe a random email here and there that says something and no follow-up whatsoever about anything. So this idea that they are going to be witnesses in this case is just an attempt by the prosecution to shut them up as well as to shut me up. And by the way, people completely forget about this. All of the information that has been disseminated to the public from the get.
Why would the prosecution want to shut up the victim's family? Probably to protect the integrity of their case against Bryan. They probably are doing this in the best interest of them, in my opinion. I think that they're worried that information could get out if the family is going to be speaking it, from what it seems. But what I don't understand is this lack of interview with the prosecution and the victim's family. Why would there be a breakdown there? You know, if the prosecution reaches out to the victim's family and says, we need to interview you so that we can secure, you know, this case against this person, you would think they would be all for that. So, you know, what's going on here that is it the family initiating this, or is this Shannon Gray initiating this conflict? What do you all think about that? Do you think this conflict is being driven by the family's wishes and they're the ones feeling suppressed, or do you think that this is more of a legal maneuvering with Shannon Gray for some reason that we don't know about yet? Let me know what you think in the comments.
Go was the mayor, Art Betke. Chief Fry had interviews. Bill Thompson had interviews. The coroner had interviews. All of those people had interviews. We didn't. We didn't until we started getting information and started trying to figure out what was going on after they had given interview after interview after interview. That was the purpose of the judge issuing the non-dissemination order, is to...
And that's not necessarily true, because the Gonsalves family was giving interviews early on in the case before there was a suspect. Kaylee's sister was commenting on her phone, the information that was uncovered from her phone records and things like that. So they definitely were speaking out early on in the case. I'm not quite sure what he's saying there.
Bill Thompson had interviews. The coroner had interviews. All of those people had interviews. We didn't. We didn't until we started getting information and started trying to figure out what was going on after they had given interview after interview after interview. That was the purpose of the judge issuing the non-dissemination order, is to quiet them up, not quiet the victims up. They had no control over that investigation from the get-go.
Well, that order was a stipulation between the state and Mr. Kohberger.
That's the other thing, though, is that the court, after that Zoom meeting, Judge Marshall incorrectly said that was stipulated by all parties. I never stipulated to that. I emailed the
You're
judge.
not a party.
Exactly right. I'm not involved in the
The
case.
stipulation was between the parties.
So,
As you correctly stated who the parties are.
so we would
I
ask...
agree, but you were suggesting that it was entered to shut down the prosecutor's office.
Why would they
That's what
claim...
you just said.
I do think that part of the... that was part of the process, is that they understood that their investigation was getting out of hand. Too many people were talking in their investigation, and that's why they stipulated to it. Yes, I do.
Okay, when you say they, you mean the prosecutor's
Yes.
office.
Yes.
All right.
Do you want me to give you a final, or do you...
Go fight.
Okay.
Yeah. You go.
We're not a party to the case. You're very aware of that. I have the right to repeat what my clients say to the media. I also have an independent right that I'm governed by the Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct regarding those individual rights versus my own opinions. But those opinions, I don't firmly believe, would fall under the publicity rule on the Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct, because I'm not litigating it or party to the litigation. And the reason those things are in place are because people that have real privy information regarding the prosecution and the defense, which I don't, which my clients don't in any way, it shouldn't apply, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green. All right. Well, I'm not going to issue a decision today. I'm going to issue a written decision. There is a lot of briefing, and I heard some very interesting argument today. And I'll get back to work and try to get a decision out as soon as possible. So, anything else we need to address before I adjourn? Mr. Thompson?
I don't think so, Your Honor.
Ms. Taylor? Mr. Monson? Anything else?
Yeah, we thought you'd probably want to issue an order and wait, but I guess we're just wondering if in the meantime, the order as it is remains in place.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeff.
It remains in place until I address it. So, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the gag order benefits both sides overall. The prosecution doesn't want their case tainted. And I think the defense enjoys the way the flow of the way the chatter is going around right now about the case. If it's favoring Bryan. I've noticed, I get a lot of comments and things like that, and I've noticed that over time there's been more and more comments about questioning Bryan's guilt and things like that. Like I mentioned earlier, early on in this case, everybody was pretty sure this was the person, and then as time goes on, and more rumors and things, and the emotion dies down, more doubts come in, and I think the longer that goes on, the better for the defense, for sure. Yeah, so Caroline says, it's like a high school debate class kind of arguing in circles. He never really did offer a valid reason for wanting this gag order lifted. What is it that they want to say? The judge asked him straight up, what is it that you want to say that you're not able to say? And he really didn't. He kind of tiptoed around that and started kind of focusing in on the details of the order. Like I said, like he's trying to make a point or something. Not quite sure. We may not know. There could be some reason there, some dynamic going on with the prosecution and Kaylee's family. The other victims' families don't seem to be involved in this. It seems to be kind of, stemming from that, whatever that conflict is. But really interesting to me that they're saying that they haven't interviewed them. All of that time, that month that went by before we knew who it was. How are they not? And I remember Steve Gonsalves was talking about he was frustrated, right, at the lack of information that he was getting from law enforcement. So maybe that is part of it, right? Maybe he is frustrated about, not being more in the loop, and that could have been part of why they hired an attorney and wanting to kind of ensure, that this is handled properly. Maybe that's where it's coming from. Maybe they, because I can see that. He seemed, Kaylee's dad seems like the type of guy who would say, look, I'm going to hire an attorney because I want to make sure the state gets this right, we have the right person, and that we get justice, right? I think that's his focus with the trial, and so hiring an attorney would make sense. Yeah, well, I want the gag order lifted, and then the judge says, why? You're not under the gag order. So that's also an interesting angle, Angel, because will we hear more now? Will we hear more, discussion from the family now that the judge has clarified and told them that they are a little more free than maybe they thought they were to speak? Will we hear anything else? That'll be interesting, because if they do have something to say and then they come out and say it, is it going to backfire later on? What is it they want to say? What's this argument about? Yeah, Letty, that's a good point. Maybe this means Kaylee was not the target. No reason to interview them. Yeah, unless there's some reason to speak to them. We don't know who the target is. It could have been one or more. They don't necessarily have to speak to them if they have the evidence needed for a conviction to support their case. They may not need to pull them in any way and just kind of allow them to be observers, of the trial, like what happens in many cases, right? This case is unique. They were in the media early on, and Kaylee's sister had been making comments about the phone data, so, but we don't know anything about the motive or any of those details, and maybe why they would want to speak to the family. But if they haven't, there's got to be a reason. I really think that they have enough evidence that they're focusing on, and they're probably just trying to keep it under wraps. They don't want to release that to anybody. There's no reason to. And, so that's part of why they're getting shut down information wise. I still don't get why they're trying to get this. What is it they want to say? Why do they want this gag order lifted? Yeah, so Caroline in the chat here has definitely been, really pointing out, the fact of, innocent before proven guilty. The state may actually have it wrong. We don't know. It's one of the two. I think. I think they either have him nailed and they've got all the evidence and he's done for, or they just royally messed up and they've got the wrong guy. They got the DNA wrong and these pings are just a coincidence. Him on camera, just a coincidence with his phone, tying him in at the same time being on camera. All that's a coincidence. Following them on Instagram, it's all a coincidence, right? But they messed up somehow with the DNA or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely good to kind of step back and look at it with an open mind. I'm kind of in the camp of I think they've got the right person. I think they've got some solid evidence. My curiosity kind of stems for like figuring out the why. Why did he do it, and how it unfolded. Those are the things that intrigue me. With the case, I do think they have the right person, and so I'm kind of more focused on that versus chasing other suspects and things like that. I just haven't seen anything, that really pulls me to another theory. I'm open to it. If there were, we've heard a lot of rumors, but I just haven't been able to find anything, that really just makes me go, yeah, maybe it wasn't him. Everything that I've come across really points to them having the right person. Yeah, so Caroline, the bloody trail, no bloody trail that we've heard of. So they may have a lot more information than we know. They may have more blood evidence than we've heard of. They haven't necessarily released all of the information. They might have 40 footprints inside the house of somebody who stepped in blood in a size 13 shoe. We don't know. Now that they have his DNA, his actual DNA, they could be running that against the door and all sorts of different sources to see if there's a match. They've only released to us just small pieces, and they'll even jumble around. When you read through the affidavit and the description of what Dylan describes, they've cut out pieces of that, and so the flow of that might not even be in order. For example, she may have heard the noise and then opened her door the second time. We don't know how much time elapsed in between there and if she heard other things. They've only released small pieces of that. And so we've seen somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, we've only seen, small bits in the affidavit, and there's typically huge amounts of more evidence than what you see in the affidavit. But I like the discussion, Caroline. I like the idea of, size 9, 13. I don't know what size he wears, kind of, but I like the idea. I like how you point out different things. I think it's good to keep an open mind for sure. That's why we're here, right? To talk about it. That's the great thing about true crime and trying to figure it out. Marietta says he met them at the pool party. Interesting. KJ says interested to see if there are informants to the case. Yeah, the witnesses will definitely be interesting to hear from. It sounds like there are some witnesses out there, who they are and what they have to say. Yeah, we haven't heard anything about bloody trails. We did hear them comment early on that the crime scene was sloppy. They said early in the case that whoever did it was messy or sloppy. So it leads me to think that there's there's something in that house that they're at least going to be able to compare DNA to. Yeah, Caroline, look at all sides. Yeah, 9, 13, you know, we'll have to see if it's his footprint or not. You know, they did seize some boots and shoes. You know, we don't know if they're going to match. I would think that if whoever did the crime would have disposed of the shoes, I would really be surprised if the shoes that were seized from either Bryan's apartment or the house in Pennsylvania were the shoes that were worn in committing the crime. I think those shoes are somewhere else. Yeah, the vehicle, Letty, is probably a treasure trove of information, right? I read something about the seatbelt and the part of the seatbelt that can retract in, you know, when you get out, and how it will roll up into the seatbelt latch, and that's often a place that's overlooked. You think of things like the gas pedal. I even thought about the keys. I wonder if there could be something on the keys, you know, from putting them in the ignition and inside the ignition. There's a lot of little nooks and crannies there. I'm sure they're fine-tooth comb, you know, going over it. Yeah, Tara says technology forensics can go 6 years even if deleted. Yeah, I think they can dig up a lot from those forensics. Housewife says wear a bigger shoe. Yeah, that's planning out the crime, but the problem is he planned out parts of the crime but not other parts, right? You know, what's with the getting caught on camera and all the other mistakes, you know? If he had been that detailed, how do you miss getting caught on camera? Yeah, this is fun, everybody hanging out. I'm just kind of chatting right now with everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Sorry about that technical stuff earlier. I thought it would run a bit smoother, but I don't know if it was YouTube. Hopefully that doesn't happen the next time. But I got my camera set up, so I'm really excited about that. A lot more ideas too for different videos, so can't wait to share that with everyone. Yeah, I heard something about that, the perp locking the doors. So we've got 85, 75 viewers about right now. So. How many people heard about Bryan attending the Handmaids Tale conference? Anybody hear about that? Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, a lot of info in the affidavit. Handmaid's Tale, everybody. You guys hear about that? Bryan had attended a conference for that book. He had the book in his hand while he sat in the conference. Yeah, John Nelson said if BK didn't do it, who did, right? That's something you can't overlook. That means the killer is still out there. That kind of was like what I was saying before with his innocence and claiming his innocence. If Brian's really innocent, he's just going to sit there while this other person is out there. I wonder how people, feel too. Do they feel safer with Bryan being where he is, or are they still afraid? I think most people probably feel safer and feel like they have the right person. Yeah. Mike C thinks there's plenty of evidence at the crime scene. Yeah, we'll definitely learn a lot more. I don't know, 3 or 4 killers. I really think they have more video footage, Caroline, than we know. I do think one person could have committed that crime, and I do think that the crime, the actual attacks and the actual murders in the house were a lot shorter of a window of time than we think. It does not take very long at all for somebody to attack somebody with a knife like that. When you look at, say 4:05 entering the house, and there's talk about Dylan hearing something initially around 4 a.m, but then the statement of there's someone here was made roughly, they're implying that it was made at 4:12. We don't know for sure, but they're implying that statement was made roughly 4:12 because they mentioned Xana was on her phone on TikTok. And so there's a gap of time there where it could have been, quiet, where we don't know what was happening. So there's minutes passing by, and it takes less than a minute to commit, an attack on just one of the people there. And so, if you just look from a period of 4:12, if you just said the attack started at 4:12 and then ended at roughly 4:18, 4:19, and then the person left, they say about 4:20 is when the vehicle is seen fleeing. There's mention of 4:25, and that's another interesting thing they mentioned in the affidavit, that a forensic analysis of Bethany and Dylan's phone leads them to believe that the murders occurred up until 4:25, but then there's other description there where the car is seen on camera earlier than that. So, but if you look from 4:12 until 4:18, 4:19, that's absolutely enough time for all 4 of those people to have been attacked, in my opinion. Yeah, John, I agree. I think, if there were more people involved, more killers, there would be a connection somewhere. There would be, whether it's a forensic digital connection, word of mouth, there would be something leading them toward these other people. And law enforcement has come out and said that they believe that he acted alone. I'm sure that they explored those avenues of other people, other perpetrators. They would have to look at that just to be sure. Yeah, Pink, it's definitely plenty of time. Yeah, I bet, being surprised, being ambushed, even not being ambushed. If somebody walked into a room and there were 4 people standing there awake and they just couldn't get out of the room, 5 minutes is plenty of time to dispatch 4 people. Yeah, Caroline, I agree with that. I do think that they very well could have been awake. And that's why I think that there's a little bit more to what Dylan told law enforcement as things unfolded. I think that, this is my opinion, but I think that she heard a lot more than we know. I think that in my opinion, she most likely heard the entire crime unfolding, the attacks happening. And I think that plays into part of her reaction after the crime. I think she heard some pretty graphic things, and was probably more aware than we think. I don't think that, when they explain her opening her door and peering out her door and not seeing anything and those types of things, I don't think that she was doing that oblivious to what was happening. I think that these were actions that she was doing. These are pieces of a description of what she was doing as she was hearing the crime happen. I think she definitely heard more than we know. And I think that information and the things that she heard, I think law enforcement probably knows a lot more about the crime than we think. I just don't see how somebody can be sitting in there. She was woken up at roughly 4 by what she thought was Kaylee playing with her dog. She was conscious at that point of an unusual sound, and then she hears these other sounds from 4 until 4:20, a 20-minute period of time. That's a long period of time. And if you're in your house or your apartment, and you're, especially, in close quarters like what she was from Xana's room, I really do think that she was very aware of what was happening. I do have a lot of questions about Bethany and what she may have heard. I was reading the affidavit. Let me pull that up really quick. But I was reading the affidavit, and the part where they were talking about the forensic and analysis of Bethany and Dylan's phone leads investigators to believe the crime occurred between, it was like 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Let me find that for you really quick, and I'll show you that. But that's interesting to me because I'm curious about what forensic information they're referring to from Bethany and Dylan's phone. And it makes me wonder a little bit if Dylan and Bethany were communicating immediately after the murders happened. Let me show you this real quick here. So this is the affidavit, and it's the part where Dylan describes the male heading towards the back door, and this leads investigators to believe the murderer left the scene. And then this next paragraph says, the combination of DM's statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads from BF and DM's phone, and video of a suspect, video as described below, leads investigators to believe the homicides occurred between 4 and 4:25. But later they talk about the car being seen leaving a little bit earlier than 4:25. So say, for example, the car left at 4:21. There's that 4-minute period in there. Could, Dylan, for example, have texted Bethany and said, oh my gosh, somebody was just in the house, or hey, lock your door. Why 4:25 here? That stood out to me. And then a review of forensic records from BF and DM's phone. What does Bethany's phone have to do with determining the timeline of when the murders occurred? What was going on her phone that leads them to believe the murders occurred at that time? So you can see here a review of footage from multiple videos obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of suspect vehicle 1 starting at 3:29 and ending at 4:20 a.m. So the vehicle, they're saying here, the last sighting of the vehicle was at 4:20, but up here, based off of the phone, forensic phone downloads, they believe it occurred between 4 and 4:25. So I just wonder, what's that 5-minute period there that's different, that that they're referring to. Yeah, Harlot only had it open a crack. Harlot says, right, I think she only had it open a crack. It was dark in her room. He didn't notice her. That light would have been shining on him. Maybe it made it look dark, where she was at. Very possible. Possible he just wanted to get out of there, too. If things kind of weren't going as planned and that dog was barking, I could see also Murphy barking could have definitely been something that caused him to flee, where if Murphy weren't there barking and it was quieter, who knows? But a dog alerting like that, waking up the neighbors, and and the attacks, from what we've heard, there is audio recording, and it's possible there was a loud thud mentioned. So it's like I said, I think Dylan heard more than what we've been told, and so they reference a loud thud in this audio recording that happened at 4:17. So I think the dog barking definitely could play a role in him saying, man, I gotta go. Like, he, at that point, it's self-preservation and time to escape. Maybe, John, maybe know the layout. I still could imagine Bryan going into the house with one particular target, maybe two, but one target, getting caught in the act, attacking the people who caught him, heading to leave, encountering some other people, attacking them, and then getting out and going. The house layout isn't super confusing. If you come in that sliding door, you go upstairs, there's the 2 bedrooms, you come downstairs, and then, there's Xana's room. But that could also play into why he overlooked Dylan, not knowing, right? He could have walked past her if it was dark, but... maybe she did text Kaylee, housewife, we don't know. They haven't released, that. It's possible, but it was the middle of the night. She may not have thought to pick up her phone and text her, but after seeing the suspect fleeing, she may have thought to text somebody, and maybe she was closer with Bethany. It's just a thought. Just that idea of a review of forensic downloads of Bethany's phone leads them to believe the murders occurred up to 4:25. It's curious to me. Yeah, Angel attacking one upstairs and then it fell apart. I know, John Nelson, that's the mystery. Why didn't he do this or that? Why did he leave 2 people? Where did he start? What was the motive? It's just such a mystery with this case. Late night live, everybody. 12:30 where I'm at. We got a lot of viewers on. It's great to be hanging out with everyone. Drop some notes in the chat. Yeah, Bread says, why isn't it Xana's phone being used? I'm sure they've looked at all of their phones, and they probably know more about, who was online and who wasn't. And it sounds like Xana may have been up if the food order was there and she was up on TikTok. And they might be able to tell something from that if there was maybe activity that stopped at a certain time. Mike C says, after 4 people being exhausted, definitely. Yeah, short period of time, probably a lot of adrenaline. And I don't know. I mean, he probably still had adrenaline going, but I almost feel like I lean a little bit away from it being exhaustion over more of consciously thinking to himself, I want to get out of here. Pink says they have a wild storm happening out there. Then my window here is perfect. Probably probably is what it looks like out your window right now. Yeah, so everybody, it's going to be a bit. I don't know if we're going to have any other. There's no other hearings scheduled that I know of. We'll see if there's any other motions filed down the road. They're still waiting on both sides for the discovery motions, and so we'll see what happens there. If there's more time requested or anything like that, or if anything new comes out. We'll keep an eye on the website here that shows us all the different documents that come out. So keep you posted. But I was going to ask you all. I mentioned the Handmaids Tale, and there was an image of Bryan attending a it was some sort of conference from the author. Let me see if I can find that for you. I'll find that image. Maybe. Here we go. How many of you have seen this image? Put in the chat. Put a 1, everybody, please. Put a 1 in the chat if you've seen this image. Put a 2 if you have not seen this image. This is a newer one of Bryan. I'm going to let everybody vote here really quick. I'll be right back. Put a 1 if you've seen this image. Put a 2 if you have not seen this image. Some people have been keeping up on the case. A lot of people have seen the image. This one just came out. Yeah, it's my Friday night, everybody. I'm on here for a little bit, so it's fun hanging out. 83 of us on right now, talking true crime time. Talking Bryan Kohberger. What a wild case, right, everybody? We're all here, this late hanging out. Obsessed with this case. It's a lot of fun, though. A lot of twos, though. A lot of people haven't seen this image yet. So apparently this is Bryan attending a book conference, and look at the people surrounding him here. It's mostly women. Does anybody recognize the book he's holding? Put it in the comments. Does anybody know what book it is Bryan is holding in his hand in this image? This is crazy right now. I'm really glad to be hanging out with everybody right now talking about this, because this is kind of creepy, and there's something I want to show you about this that really bugs me. I want to hear what you think about this, but I want to see if anybody knows. Yeah, this picture just came out. This is like a newly uncovered Veronica, from what I know. First time I've seen it was today. But there's a little more to it that I want to talk about here. Hit the like, everybody. Hit the like. Let's get more people watching this, because this is really interesting. Hang in there, Pink. Don't lose power. Hopefully that storm blows past. Yeah, definitely, KJ. We'll talk about those Portland crimes. I have been keeping an eye on that case. Yeah, Bryan's. Bryan looks different in a lot of pictures. He's one of those people, that it seems like every picture of Bryan, it's he looks different. Very. His face changes, and things, but. So here he looks, definitely looks older than high school. Looks college age. It's weird though. I've read plenty of books, and I don't think I've ever attended kind of like a book conference like this where the author was there, and was, was that big of a fan of a book where I attended something like this. Thanks, housewife. I'm glad you're having a good time. Yeah, hit the like, everyone. I don't know the date, Harlot. I'm kind of trying to piece it here. Looking at his age, he looks, I think, early college. I don't know if this would be, while he was pursuing his bachelor's. Not quite sure. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I take that back. I do know. It was 2018. So this was in 2018, everybody. My bad. 2018. So 4 or 5. So Bryan would have been about 23, 24. 23 or 24 in this picture. So Veronica got it. Yep. It's The Handmaid's Tale. Even got the edition there. Thanks, Caroline. Yes, 2018. A class. Oh, okay. Interesting. A class. But he has the book there. Do they all have the book? I only see him kind of. He's like front row holding the book. He looks pretty happy to be there. But I don't know if how many of you have seen The Handmaid's Tale. Put a 1 if you're familiar with The Handmaid's Tale. Put a 2 if you're not, just so I kind of know what to cover for you all. Put a 1 if you're familiar with the story of the plot of The Handmaid's Tale, and put a 2 if you're not. It's very complex. We can't get too deep into it, but we can do a quick touch on it. Yep, 5 years ago. He would have been about 23. Yeah, brought the book for autograph. Yeah, see, so he's definitely a fan of the book to some extent. So Letty says, not familiar. Pink knows the book. Veronica knows the book. Benny Baby does not. Kathy knows the book, knows the plot. Arlene does not. So about half and half right now. Kind of, yeah, maybe a little bit. So everybody, so the premise here, and I'm sure somebody knows more about the book than myself, but basically The Handmaid's Tale is about this dystopian future, essentially, that it's from 1985, but it's essentially describing this kind of future where women are suppressed, and they're treated really poorly. They're basically put into these classes, and they're, like pretty much, forced into, conceiving children. And, there's different kind of like ranks of like women, and they have to wear certain colors, and, to kind of identify who they are. And so the lowest rank are the handmaids, and they wear red, and then they have these kind of white bonnets, and they're, really visible so everybody can see them. And there's different colors, for, there's like women would wear black if they're widowed. I think they would wear green if they were, kind of like older and had already kind of like bared children, and then they were kind of now oversaw, younger women. But it's all, controlled, they're all kind of forced into this life. And so it's a very, male dominated dystopia, utopia, or whatever you want to call it. It's this kind of future, government, and that's kind of the way it works. And so there's this actual part of the story that is really disturbing, this practice that's done. And it really bothered me when I read about it today, because it actually connects in a very disturbing way to what we've heard about the crime scene here. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up for you. And this is what I wanted to kind of point out about the thing about this book that bothered me. And this is probably like, this is probably good enough here, this image that I have. So you see this image here. So in the Handmaid's Tale, everybody, there's what they call a ceremony. And essentially you have these women who are married to these men, but they will take these handmaids and they will force them to bear the children of these men. And in this ceremony, what they'll actually do is they'll have one woman sit on the bed, and then the other woman sits, as you can see here in this picture, while they, have intercourse, right? So, obviously, when you think of this, it makes me think of Kaylee and Maddie and how they were found in the same bed. And I'll be honest, when I read, because I was reading about the Handmaid's Tale, when I came across that picture, and then I came across this part of the story and this description of what takes place in this book, and then I thought about Kaylee and Maddie and the fact that both of them were found in that same bed. And part of me wondered, could they have been forced to have been in the bed, and could Bryan have had some? Again, this is just a theory. I'm just saying. You see him with this book, and he's at a book. He's a fan. He's at a book signing, and could there have been some twisted fantasy there of Bryan wanting to act out this sort of ceremony? And because we've never really answered that question on why were they in the same bed? Were they in the same bed? Were they sleeping in the same bed? But how did they end up there? But this was a bit disturbing to me, because this is he's holding the book, and this is a big part of the book, and I just couldn't help but notice this. So just wanted to share it. It is I know it's a little bit disturbing to talk about, but here we have Bryan attending this, and then you have this kind of interesting connection, right? At least with what we've heard about the crime scene. Yeah, Marietta, essentially, yeah, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so housewife, we have heard no SA. So yeah, definitely. That's what I'm saying. It was just something that I noticed as I was reading through, and it just stood out to me because when I saw that and I saw, two people in the bed like that, um, it made me think of the two victims that were in the same bed. Yeah, it's very similar, Ashley, to 1984. Actually, it is. Yeah. So in the book, yeah, it's a very somebody who and I do have some past videos if you've seen those, everyone, about some of the exploring I've done on Bryan's motive, and I initially was kind of thinking that Bryan was maybe targeting these women who he saw, kind of this cleansing of society. Because I definitely saw this kind of societal, if you watch those videos, I talk about it, but this societal connection with Bryan's motive. And it was really interesting to see this as well, in this book and kind of its view on society. And it really lined up with some of those theories. But then later on, I kind of started seeing things that pointed more toward Bryan, looking at women who he saw as, not being weak or vulnerable, but more being strong, right? Strong-willed and almost not, just those types of people that he might feel threatened by, and maybe could that have been part of it? So then now we see him with this book, and it kind of has that view on society that would look at women in just that way. It was definitely bothersome to see that. So I'm wondering if anybody's got it in here. Yes. So page 118. So there is something on page 118 in there. It's funny. It's good thought. Like a lot of you, I thought of the same thing. Well, what's on page 118 of the Handmaid's Tale? There is one sentence in there that I thought was interesting, where the main character of the story is describing walking down the street in this what's called the Eye. So there's kind of, think of it as like law enforcement, like the Eye. They patrol around. Anybody who breaks the rules or get out of lines gets picked up by the Eye. But they're describing the Eye driving down the street in this vehicle, this black and white vehicle, and it's described as like a shark prowling, looking for, basically about to choose, its prey. And I almost wonder, like that was the one thing that, let me see if I can find that for you too. But it said something about, like the vehicle is rolling down, like a shark, and it kind of reminded me of somebody cruising around, looking for a victim or something to that extent. But let me see if I can find it for you. Here it is. Not saying that this, I'm not saying, I'm just, of course we want to look at it because we don't know what the book is. So this, is page 118, and let me pull that up for you. So page 118 of the Handmaid's Tale. So if this is the page, remember there was a book that was seized from Bryan's parents' home. Again, not saying this is the book, but why not look at it, So, but it said with underlining on page 118. A lot of people were thinking it was Elliot Rodgers' manifesto. I don't necessarily think Bryan worshipped another person. It's not the type I see with Bryan. I see him more as more independent than that. But so let's see what this says. Yeah, so nothing really distinctive here, but some are describing something is happening. There's a commotion, a flurry among the shoals of cars Some cars are pulling over to the side as if to get out of the way. I look up, it's a black van with white winged eye on the side, so it's the eyes. It doesn't have the siren on, but the other cars avoid it anyway. It cruises slowly along the street as if looking for something, shark on the prowl. I freeze, cold travels through me down to my feet. There must have been microphones, they've heard us after all. And then basically her friend says keep moving, and then they go and they grab somebody else. But the part here that from the text on this page that stood out to me the most, it was a shark on the prowl. But nothing else really jumped out to me that would be significant here, that would have been underlined. I didn't see any kind of like really powerful quote or anything. There's a part here, this is the other half of page 118. I don't feel like a nap this afternoon. There's still too much adrenaline. I sit on the window seat looking out through the semichere of the curtains. The window is as open as it goes. There's a breeze. From the outside, I must look like a cocoon, a spook, face enshrouded like this, only the outlines visible of nose, bandaged mouth, blind eyes. See, I don't see any of this really lining up with Bryan, right, with this situation. So yeah, I don't know if page 118 applies in this book, but I did look at it. I'm sure somebody in the chat put it there, but yeah, I looked at it too. So Veronica says a lot of scenes in the book, there's someone with a different view on women can find titillating in a bad way. Yeah, absolutely. That's essentially, yeah. So this would definitely be a book that somebody who had a bad view on women I could see would like this book, and maybe even put the book up on a pedestal and want to go get it signed. I think it's I could see that for sure. You know, somebody who wants to control women, this would be their perfect world, right? This is the kind of world that they would want to live in. And you know, so it kind of tells that story. So somebody who, you know, wanted that, it could fantasize, you know, through the book in that way, definitely. There's a lot of sex in the book as well, which also could appeal to that, you know, fantasy as well, and kind of add to it. So it was a little uncomfortable to point out, but I couldn't help but notice that as I looked into the Handmaid's Tale, a big part of this book is this ceremony, and this ceremony involves having two women on the bed, and here we had the two victims on the bed when they were attacked, or who knows how it happened, but it was bothersome, you know, seeing it. It bugged me, so I did want to share it. Yeah, Letty, so there is some connections there with kind of that, you know, that type of personality with Bryan. From what we've heard about, allegedly, you know, he had commented on this date that he was on that she had good birthing hips. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it is an interesting picture. So it's the newest one of Bryan that we've seen in a while. You know, we've seen a lot of the same ones. But he's at this conference. Looks to be having a pretty good time. Looks like a lot of students and things like that, so it would make sense that it's some sort of class maybe. But I mean, it is the actual author, so I don't know. I mean, he was there to get his book signed. Yeah, Prosser Gang, that's a good point. Is it even real? Yeah, who knows nowadays. Looks pretty legit, though. Hit the like, everyone. We got 92 people here hanging out late Friday night. Is everybody getting home or what? Everyone been home for a while, getting home? Yeah, I like that, Angel, the Aristotle connection. I do think that there was a lot of interest there. There's so many books and things there in philosophy that could have had a page 118 for sure. Are there several picks, KJ? Yeah, we'll have to see if there's more of those. So Harlot, I came across this kind of reading through. I think it was like Fox News or uh, one of those sites, you know, and they just had mentioned they were talking about it. That's how I heard about it. So then that's how I found it. So you know, somebody must have come across it. Who knows though? I mean, if we could find out a week from now, it's completely fake. You know, it just came out, but I think you know, to me, it looks real. Interesting, John. I didn't know that about Elliot Rodger. John Nelson said Elliot Rodger was also obsessed with a Maddie who was blonde and popular. Yeah, Angel, I did go over his quote with Aristotle and looking down on women. Absolutely. If you haven't seen the videos I made, I will I'll post those for you. I'll post them in a message, you know, just like a post for you after this live. But if you haven't seen, I made a couple videos just kind of exploring Bryan's motive. And like I said, initially it was around him looking at women as kind of being weak and, you know, the cleansing kind of type of society. But then it kind of dawned on me as I looked at things a little bit more that I felt like it was more almost, you know, women who were empowered and, you know, dominant in a way that would be threatening to him. So I will post those videos for y'all in a post, so keep an eye out for that if you haven't seen those yet. But I do talk about that, and there is some connections there to Aristotle and some beliefs there that I think Bryan could have studied at some point and been passionate about. Home and still up at 8 a.m. and Tara, 8 a.m. Wow. Morning coffee time. 5 p.m. in Melbourne, Australia, Angel. Wow. Wine o'clock. You're jealous, yeah. Yeah, Prosser, who knows? Yep. Yeah, it does look a little bit like BTK's daughter here behind Bryan. You're right. A little blurry, but I will say, and I'm not going to say who it is. I just don't want to dox anybody, but I'll be honest. There's another person in this picture that I do recognize. and it looks like a student that was in another picture I think that I saw of Bryan too. There's another person, so I think it makes sense that this could have been maybe a class or something. It was through the college or a seminar. Maybe she came to speak or something like that. I don't know. It's like some other, yeah, it's all Photoshop. Prosser mentioned like maybe it's Photoshop, but it's like some other dude. They just put Bryan's face on there. "3 a.m. Arlene. East Coast, Rhode Island, housewife, East Coast." Yeah, hit the like. Thanks, Marietta. Hit the like. So let's take a look. So there were a few new documents that were posted. Let's take a quick look at those here for everyone. So let's see. We should be able to see this. Yep. So the most recent ones, let me make this a little bigger for those who want to read it. Okay, so again, if you haven't seen this website here, you can go and read all the documents. You can go back and read the affidavit. But right here, just yesterday, it's past midnight now, but just here on Friday, we had a couple of new documents filed. So we had the state's supplemental response to the defendant's supplemental defense, the defendant's supplemental request for discovery. So they're just reiterating that they'll continue to provide discovery. Sounds like they're just both still compiling a ton of evidence and sorting through it. We have a temp order sealing exhibits A and B. I think exhibits A and B are probably pretty key in the case. I've seen exhibits A and B a couple times mentioned, right? I don't know if the trial is going to end up happening in October. I really feel like it's going to get pushed out further. And I think both the reason being is I think both sides are going to agree, the prosecution and the defense. I think they both want more time. Yeah, Lisa Marie, it's so cool. People from all over the world, different times here. Caroline says several people spoke at that lecture. Interesting. He did bring the book, though, for her to sign, it appears, because she was the author of that book, right? East Coast, harlot. You think they'll be ready, Caroline? Yeah, I really hope so. Yeah, I don't know. I think... So Angel says, what difference would it make if they do lift the gag order? Everything is sealed and redacted anyway. I think lifting the gag order will probably just create more risk of misinformation, I guess, getting out there about the case. And it's a little easier to control it with the gag order. Lifting it, I just think lifting it could open the door for more of the jury pool being influenced, right? That's what they're going to argue. That's what they're trying to protect is, people coming to an opinion one way or the other. So I just think that they want to try to keep it as, I guess, as quiet or as locked down as they can, right, until the trial starts. But there's a lot of rumors even flying around, and that's why I really feel like, a lot of that stuff flying around, these rumors are just that, is, because they have these gag orders in place, and so there should really be very little information being released. But here we keep hearing all of these updates from News Nation about sources are telling us this or that. It's like, who are these sources? Are these, they have these close insights to the case that are violating the gag order? Like, who are these sources that you're telling us about? So I have my doubts about some of the information that's coming out. When you hear, that whole, like, even the, for example, the whole Dana Smithers thing is a really good example. It's like, well, they're subpoenaing his parents for the Dana Smithers case, and then the very next day it was like, whoa, wait a minute, no, actually we don't know why they're subpoenaing, why, maybe it's not connected. But the day before it was like, well, sources are telling us. And so you always have to question that stuff. So I just think the gag order really does keep the information under wraps more and allows them to control it and protect it more. And that's why I really do question anything new that we do here. You really have to validate it, because there really shouldn't be anything being released new with the gag order. Anybody who knows anything and who is connected to the case really falls under the gag order. It's going to be the prosecution and the defense. And if anything's getting leaked, it's got to be coming from somewhere within there, right? So you have to question, anything new you hear, with the gag order in place, is it valid or not? So I do think the gag order does work to some extent. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the comments on The Voice. Yeah, I would be okay with that, Angel. Angel says they'll probably keep the non-dissemination order and allow Court TV or someone to stream. Maybe put some rules or guidelines in place, that they can't zoom in, or they can't, they can't show witnesses and things like that. They can edit it up. I would settle for that. I don't care about seeing anybody's face in particular. I just want insights into the evidence. I want the facts, I give it to me in a document. That's fine. I want to know the answers, to what happened and why. Sure, I'd like to watch it and see some reaction and, definitely see it unfold. Absolutely. But I would be perfectly fine with just getting the answers. Seven Roses, new subscriber. Welcome. Yeah, I feel for the family too, and I'm just really curious why they're taking this angle that they are. I I kind of keep settling on the fact that they just want to ensure justice, and they're in a position financially, that they can hire an attorney and just kind of have somebody be there for them and oversee everything and make sure everything goes right. I kind of feel like that's where it's coming from. But I just don't understand why maybe why they or their attorney are inserting themselves in the way they are with the gag order. What is it that they want to say? I'm really curious about that. But they didn't answer that when the judge asked, what is it you're not able to say? He didn't really have an answer, so who knows what's going on with that. Yeah, Caroline, and the other thing is the experts, I want to hear, I want to hear the explanation from the experts on some of this evidence. I am interested to learn more about the investigation and the things, just the evidence in general, but particularly the digital evidence and the phone pings and the way they're kind of connecting all of these things. I really am. I want to learn more about how that timeline all kind of unfolded. Yeah, the grand jury did kind of catch everybody by surprise. We were all thinking there was going to be a preliminary trial, and then boom, it was canceled and he was indicted, right? So what do you think about this, everyone? Do you think that the FBI being involved might be part of why some of the things that are going on in this case are a little bit abnormal? Do you think that they still might be involved here to some extent? For example, the lack of communication to the family. Could there be kind of a higher power there above just the state of Idaho that's got their hands in this case, and so information is probably on lockdown pretty good? So Housewife says, is it true he liked all the girls' photos? We don't know for sure. Nobody knows. I mean, those were some rumors early on. Yeah, Harlot, it's almost on principle, because it infringes the First Amendment. It's like, is he on a crusade, right, to fight for the First Amendment here? Or is there another motive there? Is he just doing it to make a point for principle? Which, sure, that's fine, but I mean, I don't know if I was the victim's family, if I would want the attorney I hired doing that. It just makes me wonder why. Yeah, they're definitely grieving. And oh boy, Angel just mentioned the ID cards in a glove, in a box. Not just not just in a box, not in a glove box, but in a glove in a box. Yeah, who knows who the IDs were. I think Dylan and Bethany were both passing college, Caroline. From what I looked into the two of them, they seem to come from, I don't know for sure, but I'm just kind of going off of like the images and things like that I came across and posts and things. But they seem to come from pretty stable families overall. I think there's probably some financial security within their families, from what I can tell. Again, I don't know for sure. I'm just going off of what I've seen. But I do think that they were. I do think that they were from, probably in a decent position as far as things go with their lives overall. But I think if you kind of talk about, okay, let's say they were struggling in school, so maybe that's implying that they were struggling in their lives in some way, or maybe they were dealing drugs or something. And so let's say they were dealing drugs to Bryan. What is the argument there, like with that? Like, so if that's going to be the defense, it's like, okay, so let's say that did happen. Let's say Dylan was dealing drugs from the house. How does that, I guess, get Bryan off on the case? What's the angle there? Kind of like elaborate on that more. Like, what's the next step from there? Okay, so Bryan was there to buy drugs. Okay, now what? Like, what's the storyline? Put it in the chat. Let's talk about that. Let's just assume that they were selling drugs out of the house. I don't know. Is it that Bryan was coming to buy drugs, or Bryan was coming to deliver drugs? What would be the reason for Bryan to be there? If they were selling drugs. Yeah, Angel. See, I agree with you there. So I got a little bit of flack when I made the comment in one of my videos about the grand jury indictment of Bryan's parents in Pennsylvania, and the fact that the information from that indictment could be shared with other law enforcement agencies. And it would have to go through a motion and a judge, allowing it. But depending on the situation with a case, it could be shared with other agencies, some of that information to, certain things of, regarding, not necessarily witness names or things like that, for example, but a certain portion of that could be shared. That's my understanding anyway. We haven't heard anything about that either, that grand jury indictment of his parents since then, which makes me wonder what's going on there. And I tried to find a Dana Smithers update, and there hasn't been anything out on that either as far as her autopsy results or anything, so we'll keep an eye out for that. Yeah, Prosser, so he didn't enter a plea, and the defense attorney did clarify that today, that it is a legal tactic, and it's just essentially to leave that door open so that they aren't limited later on motions and evidence that they can introduce in the case, because the prosecution could leverage a guilty or a not guilty plea in their favor and try to restrict the defense's ability to do certain things. And so by standing silent, it's kind of a defensive strategy that allows them, basically just leaves the door open for them. It gives them more freedom later on in their defense. Yeah, they did have to clarify it, though. They were kind of digging at the media with that. Yeah, Prosser, it's legal positioning for sure there. Yeah, and that's the thing with Veronica, everything's like reasonable doubt, or, requesting evidence, chasing evidence to try to discount. I'd really, want to see more of an actual defense. What's the alibi? What is it that they're claiming Bryan was doing, or why is he innocent? I just don't understand. He's just going to sit there with his mouth shut, and they're not going to present anything, and they're just going to try to, grab all this evidence and then poke holes in it. They haven't, at least they haven't presented any evidence to the prosecution. The prosecution was asking for any alibi defense that they would be introducing, and their response was, well, we are still compiling our defense and putting it together, and we will release that when it's ready. So they don't even have a defense strategy yet, right? So that's interesting to me. They don't have anything yet. Like, what's the angle then? What's Bryan telling Ann Taylor when they meet that he did that night? What do you think, everybody? Did Bryan tell Ann Taylor, I did it, or I didn't do it? And is Ann Taylor defending him under the premise of him being innocent or guilty? Thanks, Angel. Yeah, it is a great group here. A lot of fun chatting with everybody. Yeah, Caroline, definitely don't follow the gossip and rumors. I definitely like trying to come up with theories based off of the actual documents that are released versus the the drug dealing rumors and those things. If a rumor comes out and then all of a sudden there's something that supports it, sure, let's talk about it. But a lot of the stuff that's gone around, it's just kind of like, just rumors, just kind of springs up and, and then it kind of dies off and then the next one pops up. So this is a wild case for sure. This one is, a very unique case. Yeah, Pink, I don't know if he told her, could he admit to it, right? So Pink, then the angle there would be that he's basically denying it, right? Even to his attorney. And so they're going to be looking at this. They're still sorting through the evidence, but Ann Taylor is going to see it all. She's going to see all of that evidence against him, everything, the DNA, any photos from the crime scene. She's going to see that, and she's going to have to sit there next to him and look him in the eye and defend him, right? And tell herself she's doing it for the good of, right, law and the country. But she's going to essentially, if he's lying to her, and she's going to have to see all that evidence and really believe that it wasn't him, or is she going to realize and know it was him? It's a really interesting dynamic to me in this particular case, in defending Bryan on her position there. Is she defending him from a stance of he's telling me he's innocent, and then, okay, if that's the case, she's looking at the evidence. Is she just going to ignore it? Does she really believe he's innocent? That's just such a really interesting dynamic to me. KJ, interesting. Yeah, so I was actually talking about that, maybe committing a lesser crime. Like, could he have been telling Ann Taylor, well, no, I just was there. I had a crush on Maddie, and I was there watching the house because I'm a protector. I'm a law enforcement guy, and I was watching out, and that's why I was there. And this other guy came in the house and attacked him, and I went in to save her, and then I said, it's okay, I'm here to help you, right? Who knows? But, like, what is he going to actually, what story would he be telling then? But Peeping Tom or something, or yeah, I was there for that reason. And I do think about the mistakes he's made and the idea that, well, maybe he made those mistakes because he didn't plan on being detected, and maybe he was going there to commit a lesser crime and things fell apart and got out of hand. But Angel, yeah, that's a great point. So Angel says they're trying so hard for a mistrial, and that's so true. I think that a mistrial, and then they've talked about before the comment of getting exonerated, not acquitted, but exonerated. And so, yeah, trying to break down the evidence or find some sort of error. But again, it's not proving his innocence. Let's say that happened, everybody. What do you think about that? Let's say the state did something stupid, right? And they mishandled the DNA, but it was still pretty clear that Bryan was guilty. And then let's say that they didn't mishandle it. Let's say everything was solid and somehow Bryan was found not guilty. what kind of life do you think Bryan is going to have in that case after the fact if he's found not guilty? Housewife says her job is to get him off regardless of him admitting guilt. Yeah, agree. I guess I'm coming from a moral stance there, Housewife, like just her internal struggle with having to defend something. I get it. She's taken an oath to do this, and I understand that. So, but I'm just saying that internal struggle of one way or the other, what she knows in her heart, what she believes in her heart if he's guilty, and then having to defend him, or does she believe in her heart that he's innocent, right, and is defending him from that stance? I'd really like to know the answer to that. Prosser says a good attorney doesn't ask their client, did you do it? Because then they're screwed. Yeah. Yeah, so saying he touched the knife sheath, but it's not his. Still think, though, when you look at the evidence as a whole, saying, well, I touched the knife sheath and then somehow it ended up there, in itself, sure, you try to explain that away, but when you add everything, it's harder to explain those things away. It has to really be a believable explanation. Angel says the Gonsalves family making sure they can sue. Yeah, so if there's some sort of screw up there, maybe. Lisa Marie says his life as he knew it is over no matter what. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I was saying. Even if he gets acquitted of this or something. Well, now I think if he gets acquitted and there's something that just straight up says, yep, it wasn't him. Look, and the prosecution comes out and says, you know what? Yeah, we screwed up. We had the wrong guy. I think he can recover from that. He might be a celebrity if that happened. But I think if he were to just kind of find a loophole and get off the crime, that's a different story. Yeah, people are going to recognize him, but yeah, that's going to be a very interesting future for him if that happened. I'm sure he'd be looking over his shoulder for old Steve Gonsalves as well for the rest of his life. Yeah, Veronica, that's why we're here. Yeah, theorizing about strategy. That's the whole point of us chatting here. Yeah, look at Harley. Yeah, Casey Anthony. She's just living her life and has moved on. We've all forgotten, you don't even think about her most of the time, and then all of a sudden something comes up and you're like, oh yeah, Casey Anthony. I forgot she was free. In your mind, it's almost like she was convicted, at least for me anyway. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. She wasn't convicted. Yeah, he'd own Moscow and News Nation, yeah. And True Crime Time. Just kidding. No, I don't think so, Harlot. I don't think at all. I just think he would probably be, imagine if there were actually something that showed his innocence, right? That would definitely change everybody's opinion, of course, right? It would definitely change the perception that everybody's talking about, like with the media. And that's the other thing. They complain about people analyzing him and people's perception of him. And it's like, well, he's in the public spotlight right now. And he's in the spotlight on this trial. And that's kind of my point. If he is innocent, knowing that he's in the spotlight. It's like, show us something to show that you're innocent. You know you're in the spotlight. You have a great opportunity there. I mean, just show me some red eyes, like you were crying last night, right? Show me some emotion, like, just look over at the prosecution and look them in the eye, right? Or look over at the family and look Steve Gonsalves right in the eye, as an innocent man, right? Eye to eye, look at him. Show me something. Like, I'm not saying scream out and start kicking and screaming until security grabs you and drags you out of the place. I'm just saying, show me something that an innocent man would do in this situation, being accused of this heinous crime with your life on the line, sitting in jail for the next 10 months with no bail, and you're innocent. Just a something small, right? Just look over at the camera with innocent eyes, right? Show us that. But you can't really blame people for analyzing or following or discussing the case. That's part of life, right? That's, your DNA is on, recovered from the crime scene. It's not the public's fault that you're in custody, and there's enough evidence there to keep you in custody with no bail. You're not sitting there without evidence against you, without solid evidence against you. And if you're so innocent, present that and get out of jail. If you're just like so railroaded by this evidence, I would expect you to be a little more upset than just smirking as you watch, the judge reprimand Shannon Gray about the gag order. He's kind of just sitting there watching the show with no emotion. It's just, I don't know. He just doesn't demonstrate the actions of an innocent person, in my opinion. I just, like I said, I'm not saying be unreasonable. I'm saying just show human signs of innocence, natural human, communication. You don't have to scream out. People can pick up on that. People are picking up on the creepiness and the unusualness because that's what they're picking up on. Exactly. Prosser says, if you're innocent, why do you have serial killer eyes? I'm just joking, but yeah, and that's the other point. If you're innocent, right, there's another person out there. And I mentioned the polygraph, and people were like, well, that's not admissible. That's not going to get him out of jail. It's not going to get him out of jail, but it would go a long way with public opinion because they can release that if he passed a polygraph. And Taylor can come out and say, you know what? My client's innocent. He passed we had an independent polygraph test done. They can hire their own guy. We had an independent polygraph test done, and it showed that he was truthful, that he didn't do it, and we're prepared to defend him to the very end and prove his innocence, right? They could come out and say that. They would have to back it up with valid results, but there's no reason that he couldn't volunteer to a polygraph test just to kind of say, look, my word is valid, what I'm telling you. And then law enforcement could, maybe look at the evidence again and go, gosh, yeah, this guy seems to be telling the truth. Maybe we do have the wrong guy. Maybe we should look. There could be another killer out there, but what's the harm? But instead you sit there quiet. I guarantee you he hasn't offered up to take a polygraph test. And what if he fails it? So what? It's not admissible in court if you fail it. They don't have to release it. And you'd only be afraid to fail it if you were lying, right? Yeah, definitely. It can't be used in court. I'm not saying in court. I'm saying the court of public opinion, because the defense was complaining about people analyzing every facial expression. And I get it. Yeah, that's over the top. But they're complaining about basically people saying he looks creepy or he's icy. Well, he is acting icy. It's not false to say he's acting icy. He's not acting tender, right? He's not acting the opposite of icy. He's not acting warm. He's acting icy. So we're describing the way that we're perceiving his actions. It's not the public's fault, right, for picking up on that or for getting that vibe from him. If he came out and had red eyes like he had been up all night crying and, you know, was looking over and shaking his head and you know, his family was there backing him up. What's his family doing? They're hiding behind this Zoom camera. They're not even there to stand by him, right? I would really hope that if I were on trial in a case like this, my family would be standing behind me in the gallery like the victim's family if I were an innocent man, right? But they're even hiding behind a camera. They can't come out and support him in public. I'm just saying, all these little things, in my opinion, are not things or signs from an innocent person. I'm looking for those signs. I want to find something that says, whoa, maybe he does actually, maybe he isn't so cold. Maybe he, you know, maybe he does really feel for these victims and the families and all of that. But where is it? I don't know, KJ. I mean, if you're sitting in jail with no bail for a year until your death penalty murder trial, I think that you don't have a whole lot to lose by taking a polygraph if you're innocent. If you're guilty, you might want to second guess that idea. But if you're innocent and your life is on the line and you're sitting there and that could prove your innocence, I would do it if I'm innocent. Caroline says he's not crying because he has nothing to cry about. So I don't know. I guess sitting in jail being accused of this crime and being innocent isn't anything to be upset about. I don't know. Yeah, doctor appointment, barber, work, Mikey says. Thanks. Cute. Hit the like button, everybody. 89 people up late, up early. I know some of us are up early. Not even too early in some places. Mikey S says 2 card descriptions, 2 timelines, 2 different eyewitness statements, stock images, contaminated crime scene, no weapon, no wounds. I don't know. I think they, you know, contaminated crime scene. You could argue that. I think in every crime scene they try to argue contamination to some extent. 2 card descriptions. I don't think that's quite a big deal. I think that in the process of an investigation, you might think a car is a 2011 to 2013, and then upon further review, figure out that it's a 2015 or 2016. I don't think that's necessarily a game breaker revelation there. I think that was just, you know, you look at one camera angle, but then all of a sudden, you know, 3 days later, they deliver to that person's desk a file with 50 more camera angles, and then they go, oh, you know what, actually this is a 2015. So I don't think that just because they described 2 different model years at some point, they still have a white Hyundai, and within 5 years is pretty good. It's a white Hyundai, and it's not just the white Hyundai. It's a white Hyundai with his cell phone pinging in the same places where it's caught on video. So it's not just any white Hyundai, it's Bryan's phone pinging there as well. So they're also connecting him to the car that's being captured in the footage, right? 2 different eyewitness statements. I don't think we know what the eyewitness statements are at this point. They haven't told us anything what the eyewitness really said. Stock images. I'm sure there's plenty of valid original images that they have. No weapon. Well, yeah, that's going to be tough. You know, they may now no weapon that we know of. They've said a while back they didn't have the weapon. Now we don't know if they've recovered it since. I don't think necessarily no weapon means they can't prove, that what type of weapon was used and that Bryan was there at the crime and committed the crime, especially having the knife sheath that was recovered with the DNA. No wounds. Well, we don't know about the wounds. I mean, he wasn't figured out as a suspect until well after the crime occurred, so some of those wounds could have healed if he did have any. Wounds don't necessarily happen all the time. He could have been wearing gloves and things, so. But that's why they have a trial, right? That's why you have a defense. I mean, yeah, definitely, those would be things the defense would try to, probably bring up and talk about to try to create doubt. And you don't necessarily have to prove all of those points as being true. You just have to kind of create enough doubt, right, in a trial to get somebody off for the murder. But does that necessarily prove their innocence? Which is really, the question there. Like, could he get off? Could they find a breakdown in the evidence and get him off? Sure. Does that mean he didn't commit the crime? Not necessarily, right? Hey, that's great, Cute. I'm glad you're recovering from your treatment. Glad you have something to watch and hang out. Wishing you a quick recovery. Yeah, get some sleep, Arlene. I'm right behind you. I'm about to wrap up here, everyone. Just want to say hi to everybody in the chat here, and then we'll log off. I'll be back on again soon, though. We'll be doing more of these. I really appreciate everybody hanging out. I'm so impressed with how many people are here talking. Such a great community. Just remember, be nice, everyone. It's great to share both opinions. If you think he's innocent or guilty, let's talk about it. Let's back up our theories or talk through our theories and maybe even develop new theories. And who knows, maybe we'll figure it out together. But it's really great to see in the chat here how everybody can kind of offer up their ideas and we all go back and forth and everybody gets along, which is it's a lot of fun. And it's so interesting, too, how everybody has kind of different bits of information that we share in the chat here to kind of come to a conclusion. I see in the chat all the time, like, little things that I hadn't even heard of before. And so it's like something new to kind of learn about. Yeah, Mike, yes. I don't think they have a weapon. I lean that they probably don't have it. We just don't know. I think it would be a very difficult thing for them to locate. Now, they might have some GPS data that could lead them to a rough area. They got a hold of his phone. There could be something there that they could dig up. For example, more data that night on where his tracks were, or the next day where he could have disposed of the knife, and maybe they could have done a search in some of those areas. Now, we haven't heard any kind of like breaking news reports of, FBI is searching for the Bryan Kohberger knife in Idaho now that the snow is melted. We haven't heard anything like that they're out there kind of doing a combing looking for evidence. So most likely they don't have the evidence. I don't think they necessarily need it, though. Yeah, Mikey, they were taking all those knives, I think, from the PA home. Yep, multiple knives there. And I don't think those knives were that abnormal for especially somebody who hikes and things like that, for an outdoorsman. From what I read, they were pretty standard pocket knife type things, nothing too unusual. KJ, hopefully the glove fits on this one. Yeah. Caroline is feeling, Dylan has something to do with this, so yeah, we'll see. I mean, I definitely think she's gonna, have her time to speak or has spoken. I do think they're gonna protect her as a witness, but I think we will learn more about what she saw and said for sure. So I think definitely more to come. And who knows, Caroline? Maybe you'll be right and when all is said and done. Yeah, Angel, it's tough going back and forth. We just don't know how much info they have or don't have. All good, Mikey. Appreciate you being here. Especially, I like it how you offer different theories, you know, different sides. It's fun to go back and forth and debate it for sure. Yeah, I agree, Caroline. I don't think they have it. But do they have a proof of a sale? Maybe. Now, I don't think, you know, you may have heard that they talked about the Amazon receipt. I don't know if they necessarily found an Amazon receipt. I didn't see that in those records that were released, but I think it's possible they may have found a record, some sort of, maybe not Amazon, but somewhere, a history based off of, you know, those warrants that we saw that were redacted, where they were looking into K-bar sales and things like that. They were looking at wholesale distributors of K-bars. And so we don't know what the end result is of those searches. It's possible they found some sort of sale of a knife, but maybe not. But I don't think they need the actual knife. I think they need to prove, you know, that he was there and committed the murder. I don't think they necessarily have to show the physical knife. There you go, Caroline. Don't have to be right, just have to be thorough. At least you can justify it either way. I love it. Yeah, watch out, housewife. Harlot's sharp. Yeah, I think he did trim up his eyebrows, Harlot. I agree. I think they sharpened him up. I noticed it in that other trial date a while back, and they're aware that it's standard, you know, stuff with these cases. They want to make the defendant look as good as they can. And then, of course, if they say this person had bushy eyebrows in the description of the crime, and if they can do something about that so when people look at him and go, well, his eyebrows aren't that bushy, you know, maybe it creates doubt. It's all about creating doubt. Yeah, Mikey, that could be. Yeah, what if it was left on purpose and it doesn't match the wounds? It's completely different. It could be a different knife in the sheath. And I actually would not be surprised if it wasn't an actual K-bar knife, but just a K-bar. You can buy a K-bar sheath, and it's a pretty standard shaped sheath. It fits a lot of different knives. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he used an actual K-bar. Most likely it's a K-bar that was used, considering the sheath and things. Not seeing the crime scene firsthand, you don't know exactly how it looked and all that. You know, how worn was the knife sheath? Was it an older knife sheath, like really, you know, soft leather, like it had been around for 20 years? Or was it a brand new stiff knife sheath? You know, little details like that you could pick up on and kind of maybe even formulate different theories based off of that kind of stuff. But could have been a whole different knife. Yeah, maybe messed up wiping it down. Just took one last look at it or something at one point. Got his, you know, snapped the thumb snap, or maybe there was just a little bit of DNA there up underneath the button. So even wiping it makes you think, you know, makes you kind of imagine a newer knife, right, being clean and it just has a little bit of touch DNA on it versus like an older knife that's been around for a long time and handled by a bunch of people. Camping out, HK. Yep. It's the campsite. Good to see you. Yeah, we watched the OJ trial in school. I was in high school, and our teachers let us watch it every day in the classroom in my ag science class. And we were all shocked when he was. I remember it was insane when he was found innocent. Like, people were crying, like students, like high school kids and stuff. It was crazy. If the sheath don't fit, you must acquit. That's what they're gonna say, Prosser. Or if the eyebrows don't fit, you must acquit. Yeah, the defense might ask for that, KJ. They might say, we want a list of every person in Moscow who has bushy eyebrows. Yeah, Harlot, Cato Kalin, yeah, he was a classic witness. You look back now, though, and in my opinion, he got a bad rap, in that trial. He is an interesting character, but if you see him in more recent stuff, he's stabled out a little bit. Yep, that was Cato Kalin. Yeah, KJ, about time for me to shut it down and get some rest. I'll be back on this weekend, though. I love this. I love doing this. That's, this is what I do this because I really enjoy it and enjoy hanging out with everyone. So. Yeah, the Ford Bronco chase housewife. Yeah, I just remember we had when I was in school, they wheeled in this, like, the old CRT TVs, like, on the rack, and they would turn it on, and we watched the whole trial. I remember for weeks we watched it, and then the day of the verdict, and when they read the not guilty, I just remember seeing on the TV, like, OJ standing there, and he kind of looks up, kind of in relief. And just, like, yeah, everybody, just emotions, like, different, I remember too, like, some of the people were like, yeah, and some of the people were like mad. It was, and like I said, they were like, we were high school students, so it was really interesting memory, to see how it impacted everyone. This is going to be, I think, another case, another trial like that, depending on how far in it goes, right? If this goes all the way through and it goes through the whole trial, there's no plea, and it comes down to that innocent or guilty verdict reading, I think that's going to be very emotional for a lot of people. Nice, HK. Be safe out there. So hey everybody, I'm gonna wrap it up here. It's getting late. I really appreciate you hanging out. I'm sorry about the technical. If you were here at the very beginning, had some technical issues, got it figured out. Next live will be much smoother. I hope to catch you then. Try to get it scheduled here in the next couple days, and I'll talk to you very soon. But like I said, I really appreciate you all hanging out Friday night, Saturday morning. Have a good weekend, everybody, and I will talk to you very soon. Have a good night.